Two-car garage with loft video series. Let's go ahead and jump right into it with our first video. In this video, I will be providing you with another type of loft or garage that you can build to create either living quarters or storage areas above your garage. And in this example here, we had to move the stairway over and add an additional beam in the floor to help support a couple of posts that we're going to have to transfer the load from the beams above. So this new beam here will have a post on each side underneath it, along with a larger concrete footing or structural concrete pad to distribute the weight into the ground. And I'm going to go through the process of how I would build something like this. Starting with the wall framing here, you're going to frame a couple of walls, one on each side, and you can change the dimensions of the windows, and you might need to change the dimensions of the wall framing studs and the structural posts. That should also have posts underneath them like we have over here, even though I don't think I installed them under these areas. Now keep in mind, I am not a structural engineer and cannot provide you with lumber sizes for this particular project. So you might be able to get away with smaller lumber, or you might need larger lumber. Next up, let's go ahead and install the beams that we will be using for the mansard section of the roof, along with supporting the upper roof rafters. Next up, let's go ahead and remove the floor sheathing so you can get an idea of how the posts are positioned. So here we have a load-bearing beam transferring weight through this post down to this structural beam and then down to this post here. And again, all 6 of these posts, 3 on this side, the 3 on this side, might require larger structural posts and beams along with concrete footings and pads to transfer the weight. So let's go ahead and install our sheathing along with our rafters, or in some cases leaning wall framing studs, however you want to look at it. But this is actually going to be part of the roof. And another thing you might want to do will be to move these rafters out a little further to raise the fascia board. So if you don't like the level of the fascia board, you want to raise it a little higher than the one I have in this example, then all you would need to do would be to move the rafters out a little bit until they line up with the fascia board at the point where you want it to line up. And that will make a little more sense here in a little bit. And I wanted to zoom in here and show you that we are lining the outside of the rafter up with this base framing plate instead of on the inside, and that the base framing plate here is going to be a 2x6. If you're going to use 2x8s, then you're going to want a 2x8 base framing plate there. And I went ahead and installed a couple of studs on this side and on this side, and I just kind of centered them in here. No need to put these at 16 inches on center. However, keep in mind that if I would have spaced this over 16 inches on center, then my insulation would have fit a little easier. But I don't have to worry about that because this is actually an uninsulated building, even though you could make a few modifications and then insulate it. And of course, our joist or roof rafter here is going to have a slope of 1/4 inch per foot. And basically, to accomplish that, we're going to use a 2x12 and then mark the center of it and then come down 2 inches to where this part right here will be a 2x10 or 9.5 inches. And we are going to be lapping our roof rafters where they intersect at the upper corner here. And it might not be a bad idea to strap the framing plate to the roof rafter to create a better connection there. Take a look at how the rafters are going to be sitting on top of the beam, and the joist or upper rafter here will be angled. And you really don't need to angle this like you don't need to angle the top here. However, it does look a lot better when you do it. Next up, let's go ahead and install our blocking. And we are going to need a rip strip here or a shaped piece of lumber so that we can get some type of perimeter nailing here. And your engineer might require a different method than we're using here. Let's go ahead and take a look at it from another angle here, and then go ahead and take a look at it from the back. And your engineer might require you to install framing anchors here also to provide a better connection between the beam and the blocks here. Next up, let's go ahead and install our fascia board. And our fascia board, along with some of the other projects we've done in this series, will have a 3/4 inch spacer. So you'll simply nail a 1x4 on, or something a little smaller than your fascia board, because you're going to use this gap to slide siding or stucco into so that you can make a better transition for any moisture that would be coming over the side of either the top of the rafter here or the side of these rafters. And of course, a view at it from that angle. And I think this is video number 16. Don't forget to check out some of our other garage framing videos in this series. Even if you like this one, watch a few more to figure out if this is the one you really want to build. And don't forget to watch some of the other ones for different types of floor framing, wall framing, roof and stairway construction also. Let's go ahead and remove the fascia board so you can see that we have a rip strip here that we're going to be using to nail the roof sheathing to, along with our 1x4s I was talking about. The fascia board is a 2x6. And the 1x4s are a little bit smaller to provide us with that gap I was talking about. And this strip here, of course, will need to be shaped to fit so that we can get a nice smooth transition from the roof sheathing to the fascia board. Let's go ahead and take a look at it from this side to give you an idea what I'm talking about. And if I wanted to change the height of the fascia board, if I wanted to raise it up, I could simply pull the rafter out a little bit like I mentioned earlier. And that might be something you will need to figure out on the job site. And of course, our roof sheathing to provide you with an idea of what this particular project is going to look like, or a better idea of what it's going to look like. Obviously, you would have to install a few more things like the siding, stucco or brick, whatever you're going to be using there. So not a bad looking building. And I don't think something like this would be that difficult to build. And the last thing that I want to point out will be the fact that you will need to adjust for the clear space, or the building codes for the clear space that might be required at the top of the landing or at the bottom of the landing here. And for residential construction, that is usually going to be 3 foot by 3 foot, or can be interpreted to where the width of the stairway. That's the amount of depth that you will need. However, most building departments will go for the 3 foot minimum in each direction, along with 6 foot 8 inches, or whatever the minimum headroom height is for your area. But you can see here where we are not going to have it with our angled roof rafters here. Now, I'm not about to suggest that your local building department won't approve a smaller space here than required. However, I did want to point out that this amount of area is usually what is required by the building department as clear space, unobstructed space. And to be honest with you, this stairway doesn't make it. We're off by about 2 inches. Meaning that you would need to redesign the stairway or make the garage a little larger. And a problem like this could probably be solved by adding a landing at the bottom here and then raising the height of the door. And of course, anything that you're going to have on the outside, like a walkway, to solve this problem. So I just wanted to point that out because I ran into this problem before on a couple of other projects I've done like this. In this video, I will provide you with a method you might be able to use to install a sink in a basement or in a floor located at a lower level above other plumbing fixtures. Like we have in this example here, we have a garage with a wash machine and apartment above. Now, each one of these pipes is a drain pipe. A vertical drain pipe. These are not vents, so let's keep that in mind when we're looking at our project. And the vents will be starting from the sanitary tees that will be separating the drain below it and the vent above it. So 4 vents, 1 vent for each fixture: kitchen sink, bathroom lavatory, toilet, and a combination bathtub shower unit. So in order to install a sink in any one of these, you're going to need to make a connection to the drain pipe. and then come up through the floor at least 6 inches above the flood rim of the highest fixture, or through the roof. It doesn't need to connect to another vent. It can have its own vent. So to play it safe, you might want to come about 55 inches off of the top of the floor, or even 60 inches. To connect the vent that you're going to be using for the sink below you're going to be installing. And another thing we need to keep in mind will be the fixture units. And of course, you're going to want to figure this out before you select the pipe you're going to use. For example, here we have an 1.5 inch drain pipe and an 1.5 inch vent. And we're going to be adding another sink. And if each one of these sinks has an 1.5 inch drain line and not an 1.25 inch, then we're going to be maxing out the drain line for this particular example. So we're allowed to do it in this example. We're just not going to be allowed to put another sink on this line unless we were going to be installing 2 lavatory sinks that would have an 1.25 inch drain line, which would equal 1 fixture unit each. So we could put 2 lavs and 1 kitchen sink on one of these lines. Now, when I connect my vent from the sink below, I'm going to have to flip the sanitary tee over. So keep that in mind when you're making this connection. It will not be the same as the drain line. And I can use a short 90 here or a long 90. I like to use long 90s for everything, but there will be times when you need to use shorter ones. So the kitchen sink above will have an 1.5 inch drain line coming out of the kitchen sink. And we're also going to have an 1.5 inch drain line coming out of our new sanitary tee that we're going to install here. Then we're going to come up to a long 90 and then a sanitary tee off to the sink and then up to the vent. So the drain line will be from here down to the drain. The vent will be from here up to and through the roof. And another thing you need to keep in mind that this is only one way to hook this sink up. There are other ways you can use if you need to. So keep that in mind. And now for the reason why you're not simply going to be able to hook the sink up to the drain line that's going up to the next level. And I'm not about to suggest that you're ever going to have a problem with your sink and the drainage or the water seal that the trap will create to prevent any sewer gases from coming out of the sink and entering into the room, basement, or garage in this example. So here's what the building code authorities are worried about. You drain water through the sink above, and it's going to go down the drain. And if there's enough water, it can actually siphon or pull the water out of the trap as it rushes through the pipe and past the sanitary tee below. And then, of course, once that happens, you're going to be dealing with the sewer gases. And if that makes sense, then make sure that you follow the previous example. If it doesn't, then let's go over it one more time. Because as you're running water down through this section of the pipe, while you're using the sink above, it could, I'm not about to suggest it would, but the water that's running through this drain line can create a vacuum effect or siphoning effect that will pull the water out of the trap or pull enough water out of the trap to allow the sewer gases to come in and enter the area below. And hopefully by now you have a better understanding of why you might need to install a vent when attaching a new sink in the lower level or maybe even in a basement to an existing drain pipe. Here's another project for our garage with the loft above it. And in this one here, I will provide you with a double shed roof with a couple of gable roof sections on each side. And in this video, I'm not going to go over the entire process, just show you some of the modifications that you might need to do from a previous video that I did. And I will put a link to that video in the video description box, because I already built something like this with one shed dormer on one side, not a double shed dormer or one on each side. So let's go ahead and get started by removing the roof sheathing so that we can take a look at the modifications I would have made to the other side. And basically this section of the roof, the wall framing, the dormers, will be identical to the other side. And about the only difference between the two will be the rafters lapping over here and a section of the sheathing that I will be changing. And I will cover that at the end of the video. So let's go ahead and work our way around the building to where the rafters are lapping here. And you can see right here where they're lapping. And these rafters are 16 inches on center. And since we're dealing with a low sloping roof, the top of the blocks probably don't need to be shaped. However, you can shape them if you need to. And the lap will provide us with a nice structural tie between each side of the roof. We're going to nail into both sides of the rafters. Maybe put 4 nails on each side and then 4 nails going from the other side into this rafter. And then of course we will toe nail each rafter into the ridge beam. Go ahead and take a look at the other side of the lap there. Zoom out. And again, this video won't require that much attention to detail because I have most of the framing information in the other video. So again, this side right here will be the same as the other side. And of course, this will be a little different because we're dealing with the stairwell here. And I believe I provided you with 2 different methods you can use in the other video to frame one side with the rafters and the wall framing here. That will have a wall like this attached to the roof rafters. And the one on the other side will have the wall sitting on top of the roof rafters. And the wall framing for this wall should be the same on each side, and of course the walls here that will be sitting on top of the rafters and the roof sheathing. So we're going to install the sheathing here before we build our wall and then add our roof rafters to that wall. And I'll let you pick whatever method you choose to use for your project, just kind of throwing out some ideas as I do in most of my videos. Let's go ahead and install the fascia board. Throw the sheathing on and then kind of zoom into the area I was talking about. So you can install the roof sheathing this way. And again, I should have more information on that in the other video, where the roof sheathing goes underneath the wall framing here. However, leaves kind of a strange gap there. This one over here, this one here will be built a little different, where we're going to notch this section of the roof sheathing so that the new sheathing will be installed over it instead of notching around it. And I'm not just giving you a choice here on which one to use. I'm also providing you with an example of a problem that you might be dealing with if you use this type of construction, if your roof framing is identical to this project. Here is a problem that I had when I was building my first 2-story home addition, and that's the fact that you are not allowed to wet vent between floors. So in this situation here, we have a dry vent. The dry vent goes all the way down to the drain for our toilet and is no way a wet vent. So we're not using a wet vent here, because we don't have another fixture attaching to the vent pipe. And the drain line in this situation here is going to be from here going this way to your septic tank or your sewer. And the dry vent is going to be going from this point here all the way out through your roof. And I went ahead and put a clean out in here to provide you with an example of what I tried to do. I tried to tie into a 3-inch line that I had for the lower floor so that I could run a drain line up to the 2-story home addition. And when the inspector came out, he says, no way, not allowed to do it. So what I had to do was run a separate drain line from this section of the plumbing. So remember, the drain line is right here going down. The vent is from here going up. So I'm allowed to tie a new drain line into the existing drain line. However, I'm not allowed to tie a drain line into the vent, because the moment I do that, it's going to become a wet vent. And that's the situation we're going to have here if we install another fixture. On the same floor, I'm allowed to install a wet vent on the same floor, as long as all of the pipe fittings, pipe sizes, and connections meet with local building code requirements. So again, let's go ahead and take a look at the drain again. The drain line is going to be from here down, and our wet vent is now going to be from here to here to allow for the wastewater from this fixture to drain into the vent. So this area right here is a wet vent, and we can do this on the same floor. And I do have other videos on wet venting if you need more information. And hopefully by now you're starting to get it. We cannot install another fixture on the floor above because now the wet vent area would be going between the floors. The wet vent is now from here all the way down the fitting where the toilet arm comes off of. So let's go ahead and wrap this video up by showing you what would be acceptable. And then of course would be a dry vent pipe going in between the floors and not a wet vent. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment area and I will try to answer them as soon as possible.